All right, I'm a little bit excited about the watch that we're going to be taking a look at today because I think this is the most technically impressive watch that I've ever featured on the channel, and it only costs about 120 bucks. It features a titanium case, which is awesome. This is the first titanium case watch that I've gotten. But even more impressive is the movement that's inside of this. It is a Chinese movement, but it has a 72-hour power reserve and a higher beat rate, running at the 28,000 beats per hour beat rate, which is really impressive to be able to pull that off. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Urban from Boderry watches. So I just recently reviewed another watch from Boderry. They contacted me to ask if I wanted to review that quartz dress watch that they were releasing. When I checked out their website, I saw this one on there and asked if they wouldn't mind also sending in one of these to review because I was really impressed with the movement that's inside of it. Inside it's got a Hangzhou 7500 movement, and this is the skeleton version. And this is, I think an instance where having a skeletonized movement is kind of a cool thing because this is a movement that, again, while it's still an affordable movement, it is an interestingly enough one on a technical level that I think it kind of makes it more justifiable to have a skeletonization of that so that you can appreciate that movement a little bit more. Now let's talk a little about the two really impressive technical feats of this movement because I think this is something that's really cool and I don't get to talk about it too much on the channel. The first is a 72-hour power reserve. So most automatic movements that you're going to find in the sub $500 price range are almost always going to have roughly a 40-hour power reserve. That means that if you wind the watch completely or you're wearing the watch and it gets to a point of being full wound after being on your wrist, and then you set it down, after about 40 hours, it's going to run out of power and it will stop working. So 40 hours is a little bit less than 2 days. This one at a stated power reserve of 72 hours will give you at least 3 days. Now in my testing, it actually ran for about 86 hours before it fully ran down, which is crazy. I mean, it's really impressive to see a movement be able to do that, especially in this price range. If you guys look at a mechanical watch, one of the cool things about it is that the second hand sweeps very smoothly compared to a quartz watch where normally it ticks. Like every second, the second hand moves one big tick, whereas it looks like it's moving in a smooth, continuous motion on a mechanical watch. But actually on mechanical watches, it is still ticking. It's just ticking very quickly. It's ticking multiple times per second. And the more times per second it ticks, the more energy it uses to do that. Okay, so that's the number of times it ticks per second is referred to as the beat rate, or the vibrations per hour is usually how they measure it. Just to break it down simply, if you're talking about the number of times it ticks per second, most of the standard watches that you're going to get, if you're talking about like a Seiko NH35 movement, the Miyota 8000 series movements, those always tick for about 6 times per second. So I have a Seiko Samurai. It has a Seiko 4R36 movement inside of it. I think it's 4R35, which is basically the same thing as a Seiko NH35. Very common movement that you see. And that one, if you slow it down and look at it, you could actually count the amounts of times per second that it ticks, and it will tick 6 times per second. This watch will tick 8 times per second. So it has a 28,000 beats per hour beat rate. So this one, if you look at it and you look closely, and again, if you slow it down to where you could actually count the beats, you could actually count 8 different ticks every single second. And the result of that is that it looks much smoother as it's going around. You can tell the difference. And it's really cool to see that. It's a really neat effect. And you can really appreciate the aesthetic beauty of having a second hand that sweeps at a smoother rate of that. Now, the downside usually of that is that you're going to get maybe a lower power reserve because it takes more energy to do that. This watch, somehow, they've managed to have an 86-hour power reserve and that smooth 8 ticks per second, that 28,000 beats per hour beat rate on the watch, which is really cool. Now, it's not like, again, this is not a huge feat of technical engineering. There are watches that can do that, but I don't know of any that you can get in this price range that have those two features. So for me, this is really rare and kind of fun to get to experience that and to check it out, and that's really cool. But yeah, so with that kind of blabbering on about the intricacies of the movement, which I thought was really cool. Let's go ahead and look at the watch from the perspective of a watch and look a little bit closely and see what Boderry has done with this Urban watch.
So the dimensions on this are great. You're getting a 40 millimeter case
diameter, and then 48 millimeter lug to lug. So lug to lug is a little bit long and is kind of flat, but it's very slim, only 11 millimeters tall, so really great height there. And then these straps, it takes 20 millimeter straps, so you got a ton of different strap options with this, and it does look good on a pretty wide range of straps. And I think this watch is primarily impressive from a technical standpoint. It does have some interesting sort of design cues that I'll get into in a minute. But the two most impressive things to me, I think, on this are that titanium case, and then also this Hangzhou 7500 movement that they've installed in here. And it's cool that this is a skeleton watch because you can see right into it, and you can see the open heart down below, which is great to see that ticking away. It's a fun look. But also it's cool to be able to see that spring or the power reserve, which can kind of also serve as a power reserve indicator. So you can see this one has been running, it's been running down for a long time, and you can see that the spring is kind of loose. And as I wind it here, you can see the spring tightening up. And interestingly enough, if I wind it all the way, which actually takes a long time because this thing has a huge power reserve, still have not gotten there yet. I don't know if the camera's quite catching it, but you can see that the spring is now spinning around inside that enclosure. So we are at the point of full wind. And that's one of the great reasons why I like the skeleton design on this, because you can really see into the movement. You can appreciate a lot more the engineering that's gone into this. It is a really cool, beautifully designed skeletonization on this. The back is also skeletonized, so they've included this custom skeletonized rotor, which is in a gold color, which also looks really cool. But that gives you a lot of clear views, again, into that movement to see right through it and to see all the inner workings. Now, the other technical benefit of this watch is that titanium case. It's extremely light, and this is the first titanium watch that I have gotten to try out, and it does feel surprisingly light compared to what a stainless steel watch would feel like. And I recently reviewed a bronze watch for the first time, and I mentioned that it's one of the cool things about bronze is just that it is a different material than stainless steel, and you get different properties, and it's fun to have a different watch in your collection with different case metals. And in some ways, it's kind of like, in my opinion, it's like the luxury metals of the affordable world, or like bronze and titanium. Obviously they're not luxury metals, but they are different from stainless steel. They usually come with a slight premium cost, so it's fun to get your hands on those just to see the difference. The titanium's a little bit darker finish than you would normally get with stainless steel. It looks, feels like it looks a little bit rugged or rough around the edges, and it is incredibly light. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the design of the watch. I think the case you're getting, very much kind of like a Submariner style case. Very simple design, not a lot of, refinement or anything going into the case itself. Lots of just kind of sharp edges, no real beveling, and just an all brushed finish all the way around it. So to include a titanium case and this, higher end movement into this watch at $120 price range, $125, I think they obviously had to cut some corners. And so I think on the case design, it's probably one of them. The case design is fairly adequate. I don't have any problems with it, other than some of the edges, especially on like the tips of the lugs and the underside, are fairly sharp. Not to the point that I've scratched or cut myself, but it almost feels like I could. So it's a little bit nervous there, but that's, again, so the finishing is kind of a little bit rough there. But I think they did a good job just with the overall design, because even though it does have that kind of rough finishing, I think that the design of this, it feels like a very kind of aggressive, rough, tough looking design, so that lack of refinement kind of plays into that. The one really cool design element that I like on this is the crown. So you can see they've got a black crown on this one to match the black handset. You can get in different colors. So if you get like a gold handset, it'll come with a matching gold crown. And I think that's kind of a fun little design cue. I haven't seen that very much before, and so it's cool that they included that. The bezel here is stationary. It's fixed. It does not rotate. Would have been fun if it was a rotating bezel, but I'm fine with it not being. I think on watching this style and size, you're okay with that. But these sort of markers, these little teeth marks that go in between the numbers, they don't seem to line up that well with the numbers on the dial, and I'm not really sure what they're there for other than decoration. In particular, at the 6 o'clock, you'll notice there is no 6 o'clock index because you have the open heart kind of taking it up. So you kind of got to use the bezel to tell that, but the 30 is a fairly big mark, so it's a little bit tough to see the the 6 o'clock register there. So around the skeletonized open dial, you have a ring that has these loomed indexes, and the loom is, it's average. It's not really anything spectacular. Again, I wouldn't expect too much at this price range. This isn't a dive watch. You're only getting 50 meters of water resistance. But it does glow for a little while, and if nothing else, having the loom on the hour, minute, and seconds hands makes it easier to pick those out against the dial, because, as is typical with skeletonized dial, it's often very difficult to see the hands and to read them in there. They've gone with a skeletonized hands as well to expose even more of it. Again, that's a design choice, and the result, or the consequence, is going to be a hit to legibility. The strap is a genuine leather strap with this kind of, distressed pattern printed onto it. It feels fairly dry, but it is very comfortable. It is, and it is definitely genuine leather. It's an interesting look. Again, it matches the kind of rough aesthetic of the watch. But I found this works really well on like a Tropic rubber strap or on a NATO. I think it looks really cool on that. And again, the case design being sort of a dive watch style case with that bezel, I think it goes really well with more sporty watch bands. Okay, so let's talk the pros and cons of this watch. So pros, right off the bat, the first one is just that movement combined with the titanium case. That's just an amazing combination at this price range. And I really like having a watch with those features, and to be able to get it for around $120 is just a really incredible value, I think. Second, I think the overall aesthetics of the watch is pretty cool looking. It's a very kind of aggressive, sort of rough around the edges look, but it pulls it off pretty well. And it's a lot of the skeleton watches I've seen, they try and look more high, sort of high class and luxury looking. This is a very kind of, again, more aggressive, cool, sporty look for a skeletonized watch. And I think the whole watch pulls it together. I think the way that they've done the skeletonization on this movement works well with the aesthetics of that. And it's just a fun watch to wear. And then, just the normal specs you're getting from Chinese watch brands. You're getting a sapphire crystal, 50 meters of water resistance, also really cool. And then again, the design is, I think, kind of a little rough around the edges, but one thing that struck me as working really well was the way they did the contrasting crown. So the crown is kind of a black coating of some kind on it, and they have different colors, and if you get different colors, you get different colored hands, and then the crown is a matching color with that, which is really unique. You don't see that very often. I think that's kind of a cool touch. Okay, the negatives of this watch, like I said, it has this kind of rough, aggressive look, and there are some parts of it that are rough and aggressive in a bad way, namely the finishing of the watch. There's some sharp edges on it where I feel like they could have used some more polishing, a little bit more refinement to get it so it's just a little bit more comfortable. That sort of struck me as not quite as high quality as I would have hoped for. Legibility is not great on this watch, whether it's during the day or after dark, either one. And that's a problem of almost any skeleton watch. So if legibility is a high concern, you're probably not looking for a skeleton watch in the first place. But this one, I think, is, legibility could have been better if they could have, made the hands be a little bit more contrasting with the dial. The black hands, they look great. They're really well finished hands, but they really disappear. A lot of times the only thing that you can pick out is the loomed sections on the heads of the watch. It would have been nice if they would have, maybe had the watches, the hands be solid and more loom on there to make them more visible. But maybe they're thinking that would have, obscured more of the movement underneath, and that's what they really wanted to show off in this. One other thing that kind of mildly annoyed me was the bezel on this watch. I think it's kind of an aggressive look, and I think from aesthetic perspective, just looks wise, it looks cool. But the markings on it didn't really help too much with actually reading the time, and I thought they could have done a little bit better designing that. The numbers are fine, they've got marking the 60 minutes around it, but the little sort of, I don't know, like teeth-like marks in between the numbers, they don't really correspond necessarily to minutes on the dial or any main divisions of that. So to me, it almost was a little bit distracting sometimes if I tried to use that as a reference for telling the time. Some of them numbers would line up to the 5-minute markings on the dial, and other ones would be sort of halfway in between. So that would tell like 2.5 minutes in between, which, again, it just sort of was a little bit confusing. I think that's sort of a minor thing there. But that was another thing that sort of, kind of annoyed me a little bit. But other than that, I think overall this is just a really amazing watch for the price. And especially for someone who's interested in collecting watches or interested in mechanical watches, I think there's a lot of appeal to something like this. And it is also a very cool watch, and that movement, having that high of a power reserve, makes it a pretty practical watch. It's one that I very rarely had to wind or set the time because the power reserve lasts so long. You can leave it on your desk for more than 3 days before the thing completely winds down. So if in those 3 days time you pick it up and put it on for a little bit, or stop and wind it, I found that one, more so than most of the other watches in my collection, was almost always running and ready to go because of that extended power reserve. Anyways, let me know what you guys think, if you guys have any experience with this particular watch or Boderry as a brand in general. But that will go ahead and wrap up our review of the Boderry Urban. As usual, links down below to purchase it, and we will see you guys later. Bye.